When lightning struck that stormy night, no one imagined it would uncover a secret hidden beneath a 2-century-old barn, one that would shake not just a small American town, but the very foundations of history itself. Joseph Farnsworth, a tough-as-nails farmer and proud veteran, thought he'd face life's harshest battles, but nothing could prepare him for the metal hatch buried beneath splintered timbers leading to an underground vault filled with government secrets dating back to World War II. Secrets so explosive they'd put Joseph's family and the nation in the crosshairs of federal agents and international spies alike. If you've ever loved heart-pounding thrillers like Air Force One, gripping war secrets, or stories of ordinary heroes caught in extraordinary circumstances, buckle up. This ride is about to blow you away. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more edge-of-your-seat stories. Joseph Farnsworth stood at the edge of Autumn Ridge Farm, looking out over the rolling fields of western Vermont, watching ominous clouds loom over the horizon. The mid-autumn wind nipped at his skin, even through the sturdy cotton jacket he wore every day. He had inherited this land, some 150 acres of mostly fertile soil, from a long line of Farnsworths going back 7 generations. His wife, Rosalind, liked to say the farm was in their blood, a phrase that felt more like a plea for hope than a statement of pride these days. The Farnsworth's success had once been the envy of all Addison County, but circumstances had changed drastically over the last decade. Industrial agriculture was swallowing up small operations across the region, and Joseph's beloved Autumn Ridge was drowning in debt he could no longer ignore. Perched at the center of the property was a striking octagonal barn, built in 1823 by Joseph's great-great-grandfather, a Quaker craftsman named Caleb Farnsworth. Its 8 sides topped with a simple wooden cupola had always drawn the attention of traveling historians. Community rumors held that the unique shape was meant to improve the storage and ventilation of the livestock areas, though some speculated it was more about architectural flair. Whatever the reason, the barn had become a landmark in Addison County, its red siding visible from the state highway that cut past the property's western edge. Tourists often pulled over to snap photographs, especially when autumn painted the surrounding trees in brilliant reds and golds. Over the last few years, Joseph had repeatedly heard from local preservation societies wanting to protect the barn, but protection cost money Joseph did not have. Financial worries occupied his thoughts nearly every waking hour. Grain prices were terrible, and his last attempt to get a commercial loan had been denied within days. Rosalind, a local veterinarian, tried to help by channeling some of her earnings into the farm, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. Their only son, Lucas, had just turned 22, and was as committed to the farm as Joseph was, a fact that both comforted and worried him. He had always dreamed his son would have a better shot at prosperity than he ever did, maybe even returning the farm to its once thriving state. But Joseph couldn't bear the thought of leaving Lucas with a failing business and a mountain of overdue mortgage payments. As for the family's daughter, Natalie, she was away at the University of Vermont studying agricultural economics. She called home every week sharing ideas about organic certification or farm-to-table restaurant partnerships, excited by the prospects of modernizing Autumn Ridge Farm. Joseph both adored her optimism and felt burdened by it. He knew the harsh realities of trying to stay afloat, let alone invest in new methods or expansions. His biggest heartbreak, though, was the barn. Once a symbol of the Farnsworth's innovative spirit, the octagonal structure was now badly listing to one side. The local contractor had estimated a full restoration at nearly $300,000, in an impossible sum. He had hammered boards, replaced rotten beams, and tried to keep the structure upright, but the last storm season had left noticeable cracks in the foundation. That foundation worried Joseph the most. Every time he walked through the barn, he could feel the floor sinking, just a fraction under his boots. He suspected it was only a matter of time before gravity and the Vermont weather finished it off. Standing near the fenced paddock, he watched the sky darken further and cursed quietly. The forecast predicted wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour. Some meteorologists were even using the phrase autumn supercell, an unsettling term Joseph had never heard before. He gazed at the old barn, exhaling slowly, as if letting out all the fears that had collected in his chest. Maybe it'll hold for just one more night, he murmured to himself. Lucas approached through the field carrying a coil of rope in one hand and a tool bag in the other. He had the slender, wiry frame and sharp hazel eyes of a Farnsworth, but his mechanical aptitude was entirely his own. In another life, Lucas might have been an engineer, designing cutting-edge solutions. Instead, he tinkered with old tractors, mended fences, and found ways to keep the farm's aging machinery limping along. Dad Lucas called out, "This storm's picking up fast. We should probably tie down anything that might blow off." Joseph nodded. "I'm worried about the barn," he responded, not taking his eyes off the skewed structure. Lucas simply said, "So am I," a quiet testament to their shared sense of dread. They spent the rest of the afternoon working feverishly, tying tarps over exposed equipment and piling loose scrap wood under an overhang. Rosalind was busy in the farm kitchen, doing what she always did before big storms, filling jugs with clean water, checking flashlights, and ensuring the gas-powered generator was ready. By nightfall, the wind had grown savage, rattling shutters and howling across the fields. The farmhouse lights flickered twice before going out entirely. Beneath the roar of the wind, Joseph could sense the barn fighting for its life, each gust threatening to topple it. And then just before midnight came the unmistakable splintering crack that felt like a physical punch to Joseph's gut. Nobody in the Farnsworth household slept that night. With emergency lanterns casting flickering light on the old wallpaper, they listened to local weather reports on an ancient battery-powered radio. Outside, the storm rampaged, turning the orchard trees into bent silhouettes and hurling branches at the farmhouse windows. A tornado warning was issued for western Vermont, followed by frantic instructions to take shelter in basements. Their own cellar was partly flooded from the relentless rain, but they crammed themselves in for 2 hours, praying the house would hold. Joseph found himself half dreaming of the barn, remembering the afternoons he'd spent helping his grandfather fix the roof, hearing the older man talk about Farnsworth, pride in the importance of tradition. Eventually, the tornado warning lifted, though the winds still screamed across the farm. At around 3 in the morning, the worst of it tapered off, leaving only the relentless rain. Trembling with exhaustion, Joseph and Lucas ventured upstairs to confirm that the farm's windows were still intact. By the faint glow of a lantern, Joseph caught a glimpse of something outside through the glass. He saw only darkness where the barn's silhouette should have been. His heart sank. That cracking sound earlier wasn't just a partial collapse or some broken beam. He sensed the entire structure might have come down. At first light, Rosalind joined them on the front porch. Dawn broke with pale yellow skies illuminating the wreckage. Massive branches lay strewn about the yard. The old sugar maple near the front gate had snapped clean in half. Sheets of metal roofing were tangled in the high branches of an oak, and where the iconic octagonal barn had stood, there was now a sprawling field of debris. The barn was reduced to a massive pile of shattered wood and twisted steel, flattened so thoroughly that Joseph had to stand there for several moments just to accept it. Rosalind's voice quivered as she said, "It's really gone." The Farnsworths stepped gingerly across the muddy yard. The once solid structure was unrecognizable. Entire sections of its octagonal walls scattered across a 100-foot radius. Joseph's chest felt painfully tight. That barn wasn't just a building. It held antique tools, family documents, and heirlooms from generations of Farnsworth. Now it was all lost in a single storm. Rosalind laid a hand on Joseph's shoulder. "You did everything you could," she whispered. He nodded absently at a loss for words. Lucas stood off to one side, kicking away splinters to find a path toward what used to be the barn's foundation. Storm clouds still churned overhead, though the wind had subsided to a steady breeze. They put on gloves and began the heartbreaking work of salvaging what they could. A rusted pitchfork, part of a wooden plow, nails and hinges scattered in puddles. Each artifact was a reminder of past Farnsworths who had built and rebuilt, never imagining such a catastrophic end. The smell of wet timber mixed with the lingering metallic tang of the storm, creating a pungent atmosphere. Shortly after noon, Lucas called out from near the center of the wreckage, "Dad, I need you over here." Joseph squinted through the haze of exhaustion. He saw Lucas standing near a spot that would have been below the center of the barn's floor, which had once served as a basic storage area for feed. As Joseph picked his way through the splinters to join him, he noticed Lucas wasn't staring at broken beams. He was staring at something reflective. It was a large, flat metal surface. Kneeling beside his son Joseph brushed away debris to reveal more of the metal slab. It measured about 6 feet square and had a peculiar locking mechanism that reminded him of a bank vault door. His first reaction was bewilderment. "Did your grandpa ever mention a hidden hatch or anything like this?" Lucas asked Joseph. Stunned, shook his head. "Not once. He told me every story he could remember, but nothing like this." Carefully tracing his fingers around the edges, Joseph found the faint outline of hinges on one side. It looked like some subterranean entrance that had been sealed for decades. In the aftermath of the storm, discovering a secret metal hatch beneath the ruined barn, was both chilling and oddly electrifying. Rosalind, who had been collecting salvageable tools nearby, joined them, her eyes widening at the sight. Could it be some old root cellar or bomb shelter from the Cold War? She asked Joseph, considered it, but the craftsmanship looked too advanced to be a simple storm cellar. Something's off, he muttered. We need a closer look. With the day already half gone and the sky threatening another downpour, they decided to try opening the hatch right away. They hurried to gather equipment, rope crowbars, an angle grinder, a portable generator. Despite the exhaustion and emotional weight of losing the barn, adrenaline fueled their every move. The battered workshop next to the farmhouse provided the tools they needed. Lucas grabbed his best quality angle grinder, checking the blades, while Joseph secured extra pairs of heavy-duty gloves. Rosalind made phone calls to the insurance company, explaining with shaky composure that the barn was a total loss. Once they were set, the Farnsworths returned to the gaping wound in the earth, the gleaming hatch now fully exposed and reflecting weak afternoon light. The locking mechanism seemed thoroughly rusted or otherwise jammed. It had a dial with strange markings, not numbers, not letters, but something that looked almost like abstract glyphs. After attempting to turn the dial with no success, Joseph decided to attack the hinges. Lucas set the generator at a safe distance from wet debris, fired it up, and started cutting through the heavy metal. Sparks flew as the angle grinder bit into the hinge, but the metal was stubbornly resistant. They switched out blades 3 times before making noticeable progress. By late afternoon, they had compromised the hinges enough to try prying the hatch open. Joseph inserted a crowbar under one edge, while Lucas positioned himself with a second crowbar. They nodded at each other, then pushed with steady force. A metallic groan reverberated through the debris. Suddenly, there was a hiss of air, like a vacuum seal breaking, and the heavy slab tilted upward. Joseph carefully lowered it to the ground, revealing a rectangular opening leading straight down into darkness. The Farnsworths peered into the void. A musty metallic smell wafted up. Not like typical cellar air. It was sharper, almost sterile. Lucas directed a flashlight beam downward, revealing metal rungs set into what appeared to be concrete walls. It goes pretty deep, he remarked. The light couldn't find the bottom. I'll go first, Joseph announced, surprising himself with his own eagerness. Dad, maybe we should test for air quality. Rosalind warned her veterinarian instincts on high alert. They compromised by donning respirator masks and rigging a rope around the tractor as an anchor. The plan was for Joseph to descend first with Lucas following, while Rosalind stayed at the top to monitor and provide backup. Carefully, Joseph swung his legs over the edge, gripping the metal rungs. The interior surface felt cool and damp, but not corroded. Step by step, he descended, counting each rung in his mind. After about 15 feet, his feet touched solid ground. Lucas joined him moments later, shining his flashlight around. They found themselves in a large concrete-walled chamber, perhaps 30 or 40 feet square, with a fairly high ceiling supported by steel beams. The space looked surprisingly pristine despite its hidden age. A few overhead lights, ancient industrial-looking fixtures hung from the ceiling. A single corridor branched off from the chamber, lined with shelves holding crates of various shapes and sizes. Some were wooden, some metal, all meticulously labeled with stencils that bore partial English words and cryptic code numbers. At the center of the main chamber stood a hulking piece of machinery, a tangle of wires, metal plates, and vacuum tubes. Lucas gaped at it instantly, recognizing that it was far older than any modern device. Yet its construction seemed oddly advanced for something from a mid-20th century era. What on earth, he murmured, shining his flashlight over an angular panel covered in gauges. They slowly explored, occasionally calling up to Rosalind to let her know they were okay. The sense of eerie calm underscored the subterranean silence, broken only by the hiss of their respirators and the soft hum of the portable generator's extension, cord from above. Eventually, they reached a row of filing cabinets. Most were locked, but one was partially ajar. Inside were folders stamped with words like confidential eyes only and project illumination restricted. Joseph's throat went dry. Project Illumination. He had never heard of it. Lucas flipped through a few pages. They contained dense technical diagrams, references to energy fields, and mentions of non-local effects. It read like high-level scientific jargon, almost reminiscent of post-war quantum physics research. Joseph's mind churned with questions. Who built this? Why was it under the Farnsworth barn? And how could generations of Farnsworths never have known about it? Something deep within him suspected that maybe, just maybe, certain ancestors had known. Maybe that knowledge got lost along the way. Reluctantly, they decided they should head back topside. Anxious to share at least some of their findings with Rosalind, they gathered a few documents and carefully retraced their steps. Climbing the metal rungs back to daylight, Lloyd, both father and son felt as though they were emerging from a different world. The storm-ravaged yard was still a disaster zone, but their focus had completely shifted from the barn's destruction to this bewildering secret beneath it. Rosalind took one look at their expressions and knew something profound had happened. "You both look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked softly. Joseph handed her the documents. "Roz," he said, voice trembling, "this might be bigger than anything we've ever faced." They spent the next several hours poring over the items they had taken from the underground chamber. The house still had no electricity, but they used the portable generator to power a few lamps in the living room. Rosalind, who had a knack for research, examined the headings and authors of the documents. She recognized names that popped up in American scientific circles during World War II. Dr. Emmett Shapiro, a theoretical physicist from the University of Chicago, and Colonel Arthur T. Nash, apparently connected to the Army's Advanced Research Division. Notes referenced 1943 and 1944, describing something referred to as illumination, which was allegedly an alternative research track to the Manhattan Project. The Farnsworths kept looking for any direct mention of their family name. And then they found a locked leather-bound journal in one of the crates. The lock was old and easily broken with a small pry bar. Inside, scrawling penmanship identified the author as Howard Farnsworth, an ancestor of Joseph's paternal line. On the first page, dated April 12, 1947, were the words, "For whoever finds this, I am sorry. The burden falls to you, but you must know the truth about what we did here." Joseph's pulse quickened. He had heard of a Howard Farnsworth in passing. His grandfather had mentioned a cousin who left to work for the government during the war, never to return to Autumn Ridge. According to the journal, Howard had been a researcher intimately involved with Project Illumination, which had its hidden base directly underneath the octagonal barn. Howard wrote about harnessing zero-point energy, subatomic manipulations, and other phrases that read like science fiction, yet they were penned in the neat, methodical style of a genuine scientist of that era. The family's exhaustion lifted as they read deeper into the night. Each new paragraph, both illuminating and frightening, Howard detailed that at some point the government decided the risks of continuing illumination research were too high, greater even than nuclear weapons. The chamber beneath the barn was ordered to be sealed, its existence relegated to a classification so high it was simply referred to as above top secret. Howard explained that the Farnsworth family had agreed to keep the structure hidden, with only one designated family member per generation carrying the secret. But then something happened. Joseph guessed the chain of secrecy broke when a Farnsworth heir died prematurely or was never fully briefed. Rosalind closed the journal, her expression stunned. "So our family was protecting this, and we never knew." Joseph nodded gravely. "Great-grandfather. Leonard never mentioned it to me. Maybe he was never told himself." Lucas, who was meticulously studying diagrams from a dusty binder, chimed in. "Dad, you see these references to non-linear events. If I'm reading this right, they were experimenting with forms of energy we still don't fully understand today." A hush fell over them. Outside, the wind had died down and the moonlight revealed the barn's wreckage in stark contrast. The entire property felt different now, less like a battered farm, and more like a stage set for some massive historical secret. "We need to figure out how to handle this," Rosalind finally said. "We can't just call the police and say, 'Hey, we found a top-secret World War II bunker under our barn.' This is delicate, and we have no idea who might lay claim to it." Joseph nodded. "Let's first get an attorney involved. We need advice on property rights. Plus, we have no clue whether it's safe down there. I'm also worried about the possibility of hazardous materials." They agreed to contact Martin Rowe, a longtime friend of Joseph's from college, who specialized in property and estate law. Martin was discreet, which was exactly what they needed. Before turning in, they secured the hatch with a temporary tarp and padlock, removing any evidence of forced hinges. All the while, the words of Howard Farnsworth's journal lingered in Joseph's mind. "I am sorry the burden falls to you." When daylight broke again, the farm took on a surreal calm. The sun glinted off the scattered debris, shining especially bright against the crumpled metal roofing. Joseph woke early, heart pounding from restless dreams about hidden labs and swirling energy fields. Over a quick breakfast of coffee and toast, he briefed Rosalind and Lucas on the day's plan. They would try to stabilize the wreckage, keep curious neighbors at bay, and wait for Martin Rowe's arrival from Burlington, about 2 hours away. They didn't have to wait long to see uninvited visitors, however. Around 9:00 a.m., a convoy of 3 black SUVs rumbled up the farm's dirt driveway. Lucas spotted them first. Dad, we've got company. They look federal, he announced, pressing his face to the window. Alarmed, Joseph and Rosalind hurried to the porch. The SUVs had government plates. 6 individuals in dark suits emerged, scanning the property with swift, practiced eyes. They radiated the professional efficiency Joseph associated with federal agents. A woman with cropped silver hair and a severe expression approached first. Her ID badge glinted in the sunlight, though Joseph couldn't make out the agency. "Mr. Farnsworth," she asked, her tone clipped but polite. "Yes, I'm Joseph Farnsworth," he said, stepping forward. "Who are you?" The woman held up her identification for a moment. He noticed the words Division 7 and Administrative Oversight, but not much else. "My name is Dr. Meredith Frost," she replied. "We have reason to believe you discovered something on your property last night that falls under federal jurisdiction." Joseph kept his face neutral. "We had a barn collapse. If you're from insurance or FEMA, you're a bit early." "I haven't even filed all the claims yet," Frost eyed him calmly. "We're not with FEMA. Mr. Farnsworth, let's just say we manage specialized research assets that were once stationed in this region, assets that were assumed to still be under secure containment until we received certain automated alerts." Lucas glanced at his father uneasily. They hadn't told anyone except a couple of phone calls to their attorney. "So how did these people already know?" Dr. Frost explained that seismic monitors in the region detected the barn's collapse, and a subsequent digital ping flagged specific data from a project illumination that had gone dormant decades ago. The federal government never truly abandoned the site. It merely locked it away and monitored it from a distance. When Lucas's phone uploaded pictures to a cloud service, it inadvertently triggered an alert in the system. Joseph's blood ran cold, though he tried to appear calm. "So you're saying we have something that belongs to you under our farm?" Frost's lips tightened. "Not exactly. Let's say we have joint interests to discuss." "May we step inside?" In a daze, Joseph led them into the farmhouse living room. Rosalind insisted on only Dr. Frost entering, leaving the other agents outside, an arrangement to which Dr. Frost agreed. The woman's demeanor remained polite but intense, her gaze flickering over the Farnsworth's modest furnishings. "I understand this must be a shock," she began, "but the facility under your barn has been part of a classified government project since 1943. The Farnsworth family played a unique role. An agreement was made to safeguard the technology until further notice." Joseph exchanged a look with Rosalind and Lucas. The partial journal entries they'd read had hinted at this. "What kind of agreement?" Rosalind demanded. Produced a sealed envelope from her briefcase. This was to be delivered to the rightful Farnsworth custodian when the site was exposed. "It appears that chain of transfer was disrupted when your father passed away unexpectedly. Mr. Farnsworth." She handed over the envelope, which bore yellowed edges and old signatures. Joseph stared, his pulse hammering in his ears. Inside the envelope was a formally worded document. "Custodial Deed of Trust, Project Illumination," bearing the signatures of both Caleb and Howard Farnsworth, along with government officials. The text stated that while the U.S. government owned the intellectual property of illumination, the Farnsworth family retained a binding custodial right to the technology and any future benefits derived from it. "This must be a mistake," Joseph whispered, baffled by the legal language bestowing such sweeping rights to a random farm family. But Dr. Frost assured him it was not. Over this next hour, Frost outlined that the Farnsworths were not mere bystanders. They were integral partners from the project's earliest days, partly due to their Quaker heritage that valued peace and caution, with powerful discoveries. The government had quietly placed trust in families that embodied grounded morality and generational stability, qualities that Warhawk scientists in the 1940s feared might be lost if illumination technology were mishandled. Joseph felt equal parts awe and alarm. "And what does that mean for us now?" Rosalind asked, her voice trembling with a blend of fear and indignation. Frost explained that Division 7 was authorized to secure the site, assess the technology, and ensure it remained under controlled conditions. But rather than simply seizing it, something possible under national security laws, they had to respect the Farnsworth custodial agreement, which granted the family both partial ownership and certain decision-making powers over how or if the technology would be utilized. While the Farnsworths were still reeling, Martin Rowe arrived with a second unexpected guest in tow, Sheriff Alvin McBride, who'd received complaints about suspicious federal activity at the farm. The sheriff, a straightforward man with broad shoulders and a New England stoicism, politely but firmly demanded an explanation. Dr. Frost deftly produced official credentials describing the operation as an environmental hazard assessment. The sheriff appeared skeptical, but Martin, sensing the complexities at hand, convinced him to allow them all some privacy. Sheriff McBride left with a gruff warning to keep him in the loop. With the sheriff gone, Martin and Dr. Frost debated the legalities. Martin was livid at first, grilling Dr. Frost on whether the Farnsworths would be forced off their own land. She calmly explained that there was no such plan. The Farnsworth family had inalienable rights under the original agreement. Martin studied the envelope's documents carefully, verifying the signatures and seals. And slowly his anger shifted to a quiet fascination. "If these are authentic, it's an extraordinary contract," he murmured. "I've never seen a post-war document granting a civilian family such broad custodial rights." "It's practically an inheritance," Lucas, who had been listening intently, interjected. "Why now? It's been buried since the 40s or 50s. Why show up the minute we discover it?" Dr. Frost acknowledged that Division 7 had monitored the area for decades, waiting for any sign that the underground site had been disturbed. Once the barn collapsed and digital footprints emerged, they had a protocol to appear immediately. "But let's be clear," she added, "Project Illumination is more sensitive than anything else from that era. We're not talking about leftover bombs or chemical weapons. It's about advanced energy and quantum-level research that could destabilize global power structures if abruptly revealed." An uneasy silence fell. Joseph cleared his throat, mindful of Martin's steely gaze. "So what happens now?" he asked Dr. Frost. She blinked as though expecting the question sooner. "We want to secure the facility. Yes, but we also recognize your family's legal claims. Before we do anything else, we need to confirm your willingness to fulfill the custodial role your ancestors accepted. That role implies both privileges like financial benefits from any commercial or military use of illumination applications and responsibilities such as maintaining confidentiality." Joseph's mind raced. This could solve the farm's financial ruin, but at what moral cost? Dr. Frost, sensing his hesitation, produced more documentation. These showed a large trust fund labeled Illumination Holdings, pointing to a substantial sum that had accrued over decades from spin-off patents. "Over 27 million, she noted quietly, "all earmarked for your family as soon as rightful custodianship is confirmed." Rosalind drew a sharp breath and Lucas whispered an expletive under his breath. The Farnsworth farm debts would be erased, and then some if that trust was genuine. Martin Rowe did a double-take, eyebrows shooting up. "Show me," he said quickly, flipping through statements from major financial institutions. They appeared legitimate, each referencing the Farnsworth beneficiary entity. Dr. Frost explained that although the government had kept the illumination research under wraps, certain lesser technologies derived from the research, like advanced battery components or specialized alloys, had been released quietly over the years, generating licensing fees that fed into this trust. The Farnsworth family was due a share under the original agreement of money that had gone unclaimed simply because no one stepped forward. Yet as tempting as the trust might be, the Farnsworths couldn't ignore the gravity of the underlying technology. The documents described the capacity to manipulate zero-point fields, potentially unlocking near-limitless clean energy, but also opening the door to catastrophic misuse. "We have to be absolutely sure," Joseph said firmly, "that we aren't enabling something that could harm people." Lucas nodded fervently and Rosalind squeezed Joseph's hand. Martin Rowe, still a bit stunned, promised to verify the trust's authenticity with financial experts. Dr. Frost remained composed, but her tone softened slightly. "I understand your hesitations. That's precisely why the Farnsworth family was chosen. We don't want to weaponize this. Historically, your family has proven a moral compass, especially your Quaker forebears who believed in careful stewardship of powerful ideas. We need that caution now. My team will set up a secure perimeter around the collapsed barn. We'll maintain a plausible story about hazardous materials, but no one else will intrude unless you consent." Joseph sighed, fatigue weighing on him, yet a flicker of relief passed through him too. At least they weren't being steamrolled. At least Division 7 acknowledged the Farnsworth's rightful place in this. "Give us some time to think," he asked. "This is a lot," Dr. Frost nodded. "Take as much time as you need. We'll be outside, ensuring the site remains hidden. When you're ready, let's talk next steps. That evening, the Farnsworth family gathered in the kitchen. The heart of their home, shadows flickered along the hardwood floors as a single lamp glowed, powered by the portable generator. They had just concluded a call with Martin Rowe, who confirmed that the trust fund was almost certainly legitimate, an astounding windfall that could save Autumn Ridge Farm. Yet none of them felt relief exactly. The conversation turned to moral and ethical questions, overshadowing even their financial crisis. Natalie, who had rushed home from the university after hearing about the barn's collapse, sat quietly absorbing the full story for the first time, her eyes widened as she read sections of Howard Farnsworth's journal. So you're telling me great-grandpa Howard was basically a physicist who worked on secret wartime experiments? She asked, voice trembling. Joseph exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Seems that way. And we never knew because apparently every generation was supposed to pass down the secret to exactly one member. That chain broke before Grandpa Leonard could pass it to my dad. Rosalind cleared her throat. The question now is, do we accept the government's arrangement? They're offering to modernize the facility with new security measures, and they promise we'll have a say. Lucas scrolled through notes on his tablet, listing possible scenarios from handing everything over to the government to going public, though. Dr. Frost had warned, going public could violate confidentiality agreements that carried severe penalties. More than that, it could spark international chaos if the technology's nature was revealed too abruptly. Joseph gazed at each of his children. We all know how dire our finances were. This trust could set us up for generations. But we'd also be guardians of something that could reshape the world, for better or worse. Natalie looked thoughtful, referencing her academic focus. Access to near-limitless, clean energy could solve so many global problems. Carbon emissions, resource scarcity, you name it. But historically, major leaps in technology sometimes do more harm. Initially, if not introduced carefully, they mulled over the concept of custodianship, which reappeared throughout Howard's journal entries. The Farnsworths hadn't been just random farmers chosen as a hiding place. They were moral stewards, ensuring that technology didn't fall into the wrong hands or get unleashed prematurely. Howard wrote about using the barn's remote location, sturdy architecture, and family sense of responsibility to ensure the site remained untainted by greed or haste. He also expressed regret at the secrecy, hinting that the Farnsworth line bore a weighty burden. By midnight, they agreed on a preliminary plan, confirm everything legally and scientifically. If the government provided the Farnsworths with transparent answers and legally binding assurances, they would consider accepting the custodial mantle. But they would also insist on meaningful oversight to prevent unethical uses. Joseph walked out onto the porch for a breather. The collapsed barn was just a dark mass in the yard, dotted with flickers of security lights from Dr. Frost's team. Despite the looming presence of federal agents, Autumn Ridge Farm felt oddly safer than it had that morning. At least now they had clarity of purpose, however daunting. Rosalind joined him, slipping her arm around his. You okay? She asked. Joseph nodded slowly. Just thinking about all the Farnsworths who came before. They overcame droughts, recessions, wars, and storms to keep this place alive. Now we've got to protect something bigger than I ever imagined. The wind rustled the remains of the orchard as though nature itself were whispering agreement. Maybe we were always meant to find it, Rosalind murmured, or maybe the storm forced our hand. Joseph shrugged. Either way, it's ours now. They stood together in the cool night air, feeling the weight of a responsibility that stretched across decades. Strange how a collapsed barn, a tragedy on any normal day, could open a Pandora's box that threatened to alter their entire worldview. Tomorrow, they would start the negotiations in earnest. For now, they simply needed rest, though neither was sure sleep would come easily. The next day, Joseph and Martin Rowe sat down with Dr. Frost in the farmhouse dining room, a space that usually hosted big family gatherings but now served as a negotiation chamber. Lucas joined them, representing the younger Farnsworth generation and armed with a practical sense of technology. Dr. Frost brought along a tall, soft-spoken man introduced as Director Randall Matheson, apparently the highest authority within Division 7's illumination unit. Judging by his measured speech, Director Matheson had spent decades balancing secrets and responsibilities. Mr. Farnsworth, Matheson began, let me offer our condolences for the loss of your barn. We were aware of its historical significance. It served as one of the best concealments we've ever had for a post-war project. Joseph bridled a bit, swallowing down a retort about how it was more than just a concealment, but he let the man speak. Matheson continued, we have a crucial interest in preserving the technology's security. Yet the Farnsworth family is by contract an equal stakeholder. Martin Rowe wasted no time dissecting the contract. He pointed out that it indeed granted Farnsworth heirs custodianship with the right to halt or adjust any deployments of illumination technology they deemed unethical. My clients won't sign a single new document unless we get that in writing. Martin stated firmly, complete with present-day federal statutes backing it. DeFrost gave a small nod. You'll have that. We're prepared to update the arrangement to reflect modern legal frameworks, ensuring that the Farnsworth oversight remains intact. Lucas then asked the question burning in everyone's minds. What exactly does this technology do? Dr. Frost and Director Matheson exchanged glances. After a moment, Matheson spoke. Project Illumination delves into zero-point energy generation, advanced communications, and matter field manipulations. In lay terms, it taps into quantum phenomena that mainstream science has either dismissed or deemed too volatile for practical use. It could power cities indefinitely with minimal pollution, or if weaponized, cause destruction on an unimaginable scale. An uneasy hush fell. Joseph's throat tightened. And you've kept it under my family's barn for 70-something years? Matheson nodded. We discovered that relocation attempts caused extreme field instability. Your ancestor Howard Farnsworth helped design the containment protocols, apparently using the barn's unique geometry. 8 sides to maintain stable energy resonance, so we left it monitoring from a distance while quietly shelving the research until the world was ready. Martin tapped his pen on the table. So the Farnsworths have partial ownership of any spin-off technology, and that trust fund is the result of a fraction of that spin-off. My concern is how future expansions or uses will be managed. Dr. Frost assured him that each new application had to pass a Division 7 ethical review panel with Farnsworth input mandatory. The technology's disruptive potential was no small matter. One misstep could spark geopolitical arms races or social upheaval. The discussions lasted all morning, diving into the specifics of non-disclosure agreements, intellectual property rights, and protocols for emergencies. Joseph listened intently, feeling a strange mixture of relief that they weren't simply being bulldozed and dread at the enormity of their role. The final understanding was that Division 7 would shore up security around the site, rebuild a barn-like structure to hide the entrance, and allow Farnsworth family members who passed background checks to maintain direct physical oversight of the subterranean facility. By lunchtime, Martin stood and stretched. Well, it's not every day you sign a multi-generational classified contract. He joked dryly, though his voice held a note of awe. Joseph offered stiff smiles all around. Part of him yearned for a simpler life, just planting seeds, harvesting crops, caring for animals. But fate had different plans. He thought of his daughter Natalie finishing classes at UVM, now caught up in something far beyond typical farm management. As Dr. Frost and the director stepped outside to take a call, Martin leaned into Joseph. I'd advise caution, but it seems they're abiding by the original Farnsworth agreement. This actually protects your family more than I ever expected. If this trust is as large as it seems, you'll eliminate the mortgage, invest in better equipment, maybe even expand. Joseph nodded, only half hearing. His mind was on the deeper question. What does it mean to be the guardian of technology that could remake the world? Over the following weeks, the Farnsworth family confronted the surreal task of incorporating secret technology oversight into their daily routine. Division 7 constructed a temporary secure enclosure around the open hatch, effectively making it look like a hazmat cleanup area. Neighbors who dropped by to see the barn's wreckage were told that dangerous old materials had been discovered, possibly asbestos or lead contamination. While that explanation satisfied most people, speculation still ran wild in the small community. With Martin Rowe's guidance, Joseph filed claims for insurance, though he doubted they'd pay much for a centuries-old barn. It hardly mattered now that the trust fund was proven real. Bank statements showed an initial deposit of $27,003 million accrued from licensing deals that the government had arranged over decades. The Farnsworths, under Martin's watchful eye, set up an LLC to manage the funds discreetly. They paid off the mortgage on Autumn Ridge Farm, settled outstanding debts for farm equipment, and breathed easier for the first time in years. Despite the financial windfall, the Farnsworths felt torn about how to proceed with their new knowledge. Rosalind, continuing her veterinary work, struggled with whether it was ethically right to keep life-altering technology hidden. When the world faced environmental crises, Lucas, 23, found himself fascinated by the quantum experiments. He spent hours in the underground chamber, assisting Division 7 scientists in reactivating old machinery. The more he learned, the more he realized these devices didn't belong to any known era. They were advanced beyond typical 1940s science, almost as if they'd been decades, maybe centuries ahead of their time. Joseph, caught between wonder and worry, focused on rebuilding. He knew that Division 7 would erect a new barn-like structure, possibly preserving the octagonal shape. This time, though, the interior would be reinforced with modern steel beams, advanced temperature controls, and hidden shafts leading to the subterranean lab. The irony of replicating a historic design for the sake of top-secret technology wasn't lost on him. Nevertheless, he appreciated that they planned to maintain the Farnsworth legacy from an aesthetic standpoint. Periodically, Dr. Frost arrived with the director for progress updates. They also brought specialized scientists, including a researcher named Dr. J. Alvarez, who had a background in nuclear engineering. While they claimed the technology posed no immediate danger, Joseph saw them wearing protective suits, scanning for field fluctuations that could destabilize local power grids. One day, Joseph noticed a reading that Dr. Alvarez hastily tried to hide. He confronted Dr. Frost about it, reminding her that the Farnsworth family demanded full transparency. She reluctantly admitted that if certain reactors or field modulators were triggered, it could create electromagnetic disturbances strong enough to black out half of New England. This was exactly the sort of revelation that fueled Joseph's caution. The Farnsworth family demanded a seat at every technical briefing, reminding Division 7 that the original agreement gave them oversight. Much to Joseph's surprise, the arrangement held. The Farnsworths weren't mere hosts, but full partners. Frost and the director complied, though he could sense tension from some of the newly arrived scientists who might have preferred an unquestioned, purely federal approach. In quiet moments, Joseph found himself thinking about great-grandfather Leonard and Howard Farnsworth, two men about whom he had only the vaguest memories or hearsay. They must have weighed these same moral puzzles, deciding that secrecy was preferable to letting something so powerful be unleashed recklessly. Are we still in that same place decades later, Joseph wondered? Perhaps the world was still not ready for free energy or advanced quantum manipulation. Certainly, society had enough trouble with simpler technologies. It helped that the Farnsworth farm had always been a place of practical solutions, not just ideology. Even with millions in the bank, they continued routine chores. Rosalind reminded Joseph that their dairy cows still needed milking, even if the family was now financially secure. Lucas replaced a broken fence section, the promise of extraordinary science in his head, but post-hole digging in his hands. They remained farmers at heart, tethered to the soil, ensuring that life carried on. The next phase of the Farnsworth Division 7 relationship surfaced when Dr. Frost proposed a small demonstration project using some of the illumination-inspired techniques to enhance Autumn Ridge Farm's crops. The seeds of this idea came from old research papers describing how certain field resonance adjustments could improve plant growth and soil health. If done carefully, it might look no different than cutting-edge sustainable agriculture. Natalie, who had returned from college, instantly recognized its potential. If we can revitalize the soil, we could turn entire regions of marginal farmland into high-producing areas, she said, excitement lighting up her eyes. Joseph was cautious. We must ensure it won't lead to suspicious yields. We can't draw the wrong kind of attention, Lucas chimed in. But Dad, if this stuff works, we could demonstrate it safely here first. It might help feed more people if it's ever declassified. Rosalind understood his perspective. As a veterinarian, she'd seen the heartbreak of food shortages and diseased livestock, especially on poorly funded farms. Maybe we can start small, one field, she suggested, and track everything meticulously. They hammered out a plan with Dr. Frost and the director's blessing. Division 7 scientists set up discrete equipment in a single half-acre plot. They rigged cables buried a foot underground, connected to a device in the subterranean lab that tuned the soil's energetic profile. Lucas monitored sensors that recorded pH levels, soil moisture, microbial activity, and more. If the data matched the predictions from the old illumination files, that field could yield up to 30% more produce with fewer fertilizers. Over the following months, the Farnsworths witnessed something remarkable. The illumination field drew up natural nutrients from deeper soil layers, balancing microbial populations so that fertilizers were barely needed. Earthworms thrived, weeds didn't overrun, and the plants, mostly corn, squash, and tomatoes, grew vigorously. Natalie documented everything for her agricultural economics project using carefully worded notes that never revealed the technology's true source. At harvest time, that half-acre outperformed any other patch on Autumn Ridge Farm. The yield data left the Farnsworths speechless. Without tipping off neighbors, they sold the produce normally, but they saved a portion to test its nutritional content. Frost quietly had it analyzed in a government lab. The results showed higher nutrient density with no harmful anomalies. The Farnsworths realized that if illumination technology were applied globally safely and gradually it could transform farming, reduce hunger, and mitigate climate stress. However, the demonstration also illuminated a stark reality. If word got out, the Farnsworth family could be hounded by corporations, foreign governments, and unscrupulous entities wanting to corner the new technology. "Now I see why secrecy was necessary," Joseph remarked to Rosalind as they reviewed the harvest data in their living room. "Release it too fast and it could trigger an arms race in agriculture. We'd have biotech giants fighting each other to exploit every patent." Rosalind nodded, but her brow furrowed. "Still, it feels wrong to keep such a thing hidden. People are starving around the world." Joseph believed, however, that introducing it under the right conditions and at the right pace was crucial. Division 7 had historically erred on the side of total secrecy, but the Farnsworths saw a middle path. What if they carefully tested small-scale applications, studied the social and environmental impact, and only then expanded? They brought this idea to Dr. Frost, who was surprisingly open to it. "We need real-world data after all," she agreed, and the Farnsworth family is best positioned to do it responsibly. In the subterranean lab, Lucas collaborated with Dr. J. Alvarez, refining the calibration equipment to ensure minimal field leak. They discovered that if too large an area was subjected to the illumination field, local power surges or strange electromagnetic phenomena could occur. At one point, half the farm's equipment panels flickered madly. The lights in the house blinked and the windmill data sensor overloaded. They quickly scaled back the test radius. Through trial and error, they found a stable zone that improved plant growth without messing up the grid. The Farnsworths also dealt with occasional friction from the Division 7 Old Guard scientists who believed any incremental release of illumination technology was dangerous. But Dr. Frost and Director Matheson overruled them, citing the Farnsworth legacy and the original contract that gave the family a decisive voice. The Farnsworths, once drowning in debt, were now the stewards of an extraordinary hush-hush revolution in agriculture. They never stopped feeling the immensity of the responsibility. 2 years passed, and the new state-of-the-art octagonal barn stood proudly at the exact spot where its historic predecessor had fallen. On the outside, it looked much like the original red siding, a small cupola, the 8-sided design that Caleb Farnsworth had pioneered nearly 2 centuries earlier. Inside, it was a marvel of modern engineering, built with disguised steel beams and hidden passages leading to the underground research complex. The Farnsworths had worked with Division 7's architects to ensure the building respected local aesthetics. They even salvaged some boards from the original barn to place in a decorative pattern near the entrance, paying homage to the farm's history. The new barn allowed for expanded safe testing. Joseph set aside a dozen acres to apply illumination-based soil treatments and resonance adjustments. Over time, they refined the technology to produce near-optimal growing conditions. Even the harsh Vermont winters seemed to have less impact on their yields. Natalie, now graduated with a degree in agricultural economics, was championing the idea of a Farnsworth pilot program where they'd share massed versions of the new technique with struggling farms across the state. The official story was that Farnsworth Farm had developed advanced, sustainable farming methods derived from old Quaker teachings. Division 7's stance on scaling up was cautious but not dismissive. Dr. Frost felt that broader trials could be beneficial to gather data. She also recognized the Farnsworth's moral concern. It was unconscionable to hoard a food-growing breakthrough that could alleviate hunger and environmental harm. Meanwhile, the director wanted to ensure that the technology didn't become a silver bullet, overshadowing the risk of sudden leaps. They opted for incremental expansions, working with select agricultural extension offices. This covert infiltration into mainstream farming knowledge disguised as advanced research was exactly how the Farnsworth family managed to fulfill its legacy without blowing the lid off global secrecy. Occasionally, Joseph would look around at the bustling new barn, scientists, extension agents, even occasional visits from out-of-state farm co-ops, and marvel at how seamlessly illusions of normalcy hid the greatest secret in Addison County. The Farnsworth operation had become a magnet for agricultural researchers. Its success story, known throughout Vermont, tours were given, though only in designated public areas, leaving the hidden labs and subterranean corridors locked away behind unmarked doors. The Farnsworth brand, once overshadowed by industrial competition, was now riding a wave of both local admiration and private suspicion. The Farnsworths also had to manage a different challenge: significant revenue. With the trust fund still expanding from new patents quietly integrated into civilian industries, battery improvements, water filtration, membranes, high-efficiency components, money was no longer a problem. They poured funds back into the community, upgrading local schools, funding medical clinics, and supporting farmland preservation efforts. Rumors circulated that someone in the Farnsworth family must have invested in the right tech stocks. Joseph rarely confirmed or denied such speculation. In private moments, both Joseph and Rosalind wrestled with the moral complexity of what they were doing. They believed they were on the right path, testing technology that could help humanity in safe increments. But they also recognized how precarious it all was. One leak, one unscrupulous agent, and the entire project could be exposed, possibly sparking global chaos or corporate feeding frenzies. Every step forward had to be measured, every demonstration carefully planned. Their children Lucas and Natalie adopted this cautious ethic seamlessly. Though each in their own way, Natalie was the outward face discussing sustainable farming. Lucas was the tinkerer, ensuring it all worked behind the scenes. Joseph sometimes recalled a passage from Howard's journal. This knowledge is not meant to be hidden forever, but neither can it be unleashed blindly. It demands wisdom that few possess. The Farnsworth family must stand as that gate for the sake of all. In Joseph's eyes, that summarized their role perfectly. They were a gate, not a dam to block progress, nor a floodgate to release it indiscriminately, but something in between, regulating the flow of a mighty river so it wouldn't destroy the valley below. 4 years after the barn collapse, Autumn Ridge Farm looked vibrant and modern, yet still carried the essence of Farnsworth tradition. Large swaths of farmland were in rotation, some for standard crops and some for quietly experimental ones. Sheep grazed in carefully maintained pastures, their health subtly improved by innovative feeds grown in illumination-treated soil. The orchard boasted apples with robust size and flavor, all while requiring fewer pesticides. The local co-op markets eagerly snapped up Farnsworth produce, and visitors from across the country came to see the fabled rejuvenation of a historic farm. On a crisp autumn morning, Joseph held a small conference in the newly rebuilt barn's common area. A discussion with Vermont agricultural extension officers. Natalie led the briefing seamlessly, weaving references to advanced composting, microbial synergy, and novel irrigation methods. A few times Joseph caught glimpses of Dr. Frost in the background wearing an inconspicuous sweater instead of her usual black suit, listening in silently. She would occasionally nod in approval whenever Natalie hinted at a future rollout to other regions. For all the complexities, Joseph felt a swell of pride at how far they'd come. That pride was tested when a rumor began circulating that the Farnsworth operation was too good to be true. A local reporter from Burlington pressed for an interview, wanting to explore how exactly they were achieving record yields. Joseph agreed to a carefully orchestrated meeting, using half-truths about generational knowledge and partnerships with the Extension Service. The reporter didn't seem fully convinced, but there was no smoking gun. The Farnsworth barn remained off-limits for any unsupervised visit, explained away as a research space with proprietary technology. Tensions rose in a different corner. Some of Division 7's scientists, especially the older ones, grew restless about the Farnsworth expansions. They worried that any slip could compromise decades of secrecy. Dr. Frost and Director Matheson brokered a cautious compromise, pushing forward with the Farnsworth strategy, but implementing rigorous data encryption and disclaimers about non-disclosure. Joseph recognized that Division 7 still viewed the Farnsworth family as both a necessary ally and a potential risk. That was the nature of a partnership forged in secrecy. One evening after a day of orchard inspections, Joseph and Rosalind found themselves on the farmhouse porch sipping cider. They chatted quietly about the farm's transformation. "Remember when we worried about losing everything?" Rosalind said, a nostalgic melancholy in her voice. "Now we're dealing with implementing hidden quantum technology," Joseph replied, shaking his head as if to say, "How did we get here?" In the distance, they could see the glow of discrete floodlights around the new barn, ensuring no one tampered with a concealed entrance. After hours, Lucas appeared breathless, having just come up from the lab. "We need you guys to see something," she said. They followed him down. A new set of readings suggested that the farmland beyond Autumn Ridge across several miles was gradually improving in fertility, almost as though the illumination field had started to seep outward. "We thought we contained it," Lucas explained. But it seems the beneficial effects are slowly radiating, maybe carried by groundwater or shared microbial network, Rosalind's scientific mind sparked. That could be monumental but also dangerous if it spurs questions from neighbors. They talked it through in the lab, Dr. Frost chiming in by phone verifying that a slight extension of the field wouldn't pose a safety hazard. The Farnsworths agreed that it was safer to let local farmland benefit quietly than to try reining it in abruptly. Just keep monitoring, Joseph instructed, and keep it subtle. The notion that illumination technology could spontaneously improve the wider ecosystem delighted them but reinforced the precarious line they walked. One day they might reveal how it happened. For now, they would let nature continue its gentle under-the-radar transformation. A decade after the infamous storm, Autumn Ridge Farm stood as a beacon of quiet innovation. The Farnsworth legacy had shifted in a way no one could have predicted, from scrappy family farmers on the brink of bankruptcy to multi-generational stewards of life-changing science. The new barn felt comfortably broken in, though it housed cutting-edge labs behind rustic walls. The local community revered Joseph as a pillar of sustainable agriculture, never guessing the extraordinary secret that kept his fields so fruitful. Lucas, now in his early 30s, had become the go-to expert for day-to-day illumination management. He oversaw calibrations, ensuring that subtle resonance fields remained stable. His childhood fascination with machines found the ultimate outlet in this hidden underground realm of advanced devices. Natalie, in her late 20s, spearheaded the Farnsworth Agricultural Foundation, a philanthropic arm that funneled quiet capital into global farm aid programs. Through carefully masked techniques, they introduced improved soil practices and water management solutions in parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Observers credited Farnsworth's philanthropic approach and Vermont-born ingenuity, never suspecting an advanced quantum origin. Rosalind continued her veterinary practice, but her knowledge of illumination-based health insights allowed her to pioneer new treatments for livestock diseases. She stopped short of using direct quantum manipulation, but harnessed better feeds, improved water filtration in low-stress environments. Local farmers praised her results, praising Dr. Farnsworth's special vitamins, never realizing they were grown from soil touched by illumination fields. Even Dr. Frost, who had become something like a family friend, marveled at how seamlessly Farnsworth's solutions integrated into everyday life without alerting the broader world. Yet the Farnsworths never forgot the underlying tension. They lived with the knowledge that a single slip, a data leak, a disgruntled scientist, or a meddling reporter could blow open the entire operation. In Washington, new political administrations came and went, some more paranoid than others. Once or twice, Director Matheson hinted that certain branches of government wanted to consolidate the illumination assets, possibly removing them from Farnsworth's control. But the original contract and the Farnsworth's steadfast reputation stood as bulwarks against such maneuvers. One crisp October afternoon, Joseph found himself in the attic of the farmhouse, rummaging for old photographs. He stumbled upon a dusty box labeled Barn Records, 1823-1950. Inside were pictures of the original octagonal barn at various stages of repair. One photo, presumably from the 1930s, showed a young man posing with a group of scientists in lab coats, clearly not typical farmhands. On the back, someone had scrawled, "Howard with the illumination team, 1939." Joseph stared at the faces. Howard Farnsworth looked surprisingly young and proud, standing next to men who wore serious expressions. Did they have any idea how long it would last? Joseph wondered. He also found a letter from Howard to Caleb Farnsworth, never mailed, likely stashed away. It read in part, "We are on the threshold of something profound. If it can be harnessed for peace, it may end all wars of resource. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could usher in horrors beyond measure. Our family must stand as the line in the sand." Joseph felt a chill. His ancestor had foreseen the moral stakes. Reading it in the warmth of the attic, Joseph felt both humbled and reassured. The Farnsworths had long understood that technology alone didn't save or doom humanity. Human choices did. He brought the letter downstairs and shared it with Rosalind, Lucas, and Natalie. They gathered around the kitchen table, the same place where they'd first talked about the barn's collapse all those years ago. A hush lingered after Joseph finished reading. Lucas spoke first. "We're continuing that line in the sand. You know?" Natalie nodded. "By rolling it out carefully to those in need, never letting it become a corporate weapon." That's exactly what Howard wanted. Rosalind gave Joseph a warm smile. "I think he'd be proud of us." Joseph felt a surge of gratitude both for his family and for the improbable journey that had brought them here. They were a close-knit unit whose sense of right and wrong kept them from exploiting illumination or letting it loose without caution. Leaning back in his chair, Joseph gazed at the old letter again. Yes, he murmured. We are the line in the sand, and we'll keep standing here as long as we're needed. Seasons continued to turn at Autumn Ridge Farm, each bringing its rhythms of planting, tending, and harvesting. But now these rural patterns intertwined with advanced research into quantum phenomena, bridging eras in a way no one outside the farm could begin to imagine. Tourists driving by only saw the picturesque red barn restored to its octagonal glory. They didn't see the subterranean corridors lined with softly humming equipment or the carefully monitored fields whose yields defied conventional logic. They didn't see the laptop screens in the farmhouse showing real-time data from pilot programs around the world, all quietly shaped by illumination-based insights. Joseph, now in his mid-50s, remained the family's cornerstone, guiding them with the practical wisdom forged by years of adversity. Rosalind's calm determination underpinned the moral and scientific choices they made. Lucas, with graying temples hinting at the countless hours spent perfecting the technology, had become a subtle virtuoso of quantum field management. Natalie, traveling the globe as a philanthropic voice, orchestrated the Farnsworth Foundation's outreach, enabling discrete expansions of sustainable practices in places that desperately needed them. Through it all, Division 7 recognized that the Farnsworths were not merely convenient partners, but essential stewards, ensuring illumination didn't become a destructive force. Sometimes at dusk, Joseph would ascend to the small loft in the new barn, a space reminiscent of the old loft he'd known as a boy. He'd stare at the farmland that had shaped his entire life, thinking of how close they'd come to losing everything. That catastrophic storm had ironically saved them, ripping away a structure that hid an even greater treasure. If the barn had stood for another decade, would they still be oblivious to their role as guardians of a hidden technology? Would the trust have gone unclaimed, the farm gone bankrupt, and Illumination's destiny fallen into more volatile hands? He remembered the terrifying night of the storm, the hushed confusion when they first lifted the metal hatch, the shock of discovering the underground chamber. It felt like a lifetime ago. In the intervening years, he'd learned that the Farnsworths had never been just farmers. They were agricultural innovators. Yes, but also unwitting caretakers of a monumental secret. That responsibility had weighed on past generations, and now it weighed on them. Yet their success at implementing small-scale solutions showed that an incremental ethical rollout was possible. Perhaps in another generation, humanity would indeed be ready for a broader unveiling. Gazing at the horizon, Joseph took solace in the knowledge that the Farnsworth family had found a balance between tradition and progress. They hadn't abandoned their farming roots. They still woke early to tend animals, rotate crops, and fill the silos. But they also oversaw the world's most advanced quantum labs hidden beneath their fields, quietly forging a new path for sustainability. If the day ever came for Illumination's full disclosure, when geopolitics, economics, and social structures were prepared, he believed the Farnsworths would be the bridge between secrecy and open innovation. For now, the world went on mostly unaware that a nondescript farm in western Vermont was quietly reshaping the future of agriculture and energy. Television shows featured stories on local heroes in Addison County, farmers championing natural methods, ironically labeling Farnsworth produce as proudly traditional. Yet behind that humble label was a technology that once threatened to shake the foundations of world power. By choosing patience, caution, and moral commitment, the Farnsworths honored the vision set forth by Howard Farnsworth and the Quaker ancestors who built the very barn that once concealed humanity's next great leap. And so the Farnsworths continued living on the edge of two worlds, the earthy realm of planting and harvest and the dazzling promise of quantum discovery. With each season's passing, they refined their quiet revolution, maintaining the solemn vow that had been entrusted to them. Generations before, Caleb and Howard Farnsworth had signed documents, written letters, and left diaries that all spoke to a singular truth. Knowledge of immense power demands responsible stewardship above all else. Now Joseph, Rosalind, Lucas, and Natalie bore that torch, shaping a more hopeful future. One subtle, carefully calibrated step at a time, just as farmers always have sowing seeds and trusting in the time it takes them to grow. In the quiet aftermath of the chaos, Joseph Farnsworth stood atop his family's land, watching the sun set on fields that hid revolutionary secrets. His journey from desperate farmer to guardian of technology, powerful enough to alter humanity's future, proved one thing clearly. Courage isn't found in grand gestures, but in choices made when no one's watching. With steadfast American grit, Joseph and his family took control of their destiny, protecting groundbreaking innovations that promise to heal our soil, feed millions, and secure freedom for future generations. They discovered that sometimes real heroism means safeguarding the world from its own ambition. If this story moved you, sparked your imagination, or stirred memories of your own life's battles, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your take on Joseph's decisions, the technology hidden beneath his barn, and what you would do in his boots. Let's get the discussion rolling.